Well, hello, it's your girl Net. And listen, we're going to go straight into the word. I'm not going to waste no time. So, um, basically, what we're going to discuss today is we're going to talk about allowing your mind to be like Christ. We probably all know this verse, and I'm going to read it really quickly. Philippians 2 and 5. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. I'm going to read it one more time. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Now, I'm going to start from Philippians 2, and we're going to go from verse 1 through 7. Philippians 2, verse 1 through 7. And it reads as thus. If there be therefore any consolation in Christ, if any comfort of love, any fellowship of the Spirit, if any bowels and mercies, fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Let nothing be done through strife or vain glory, but in lowliness of mind let each esteem other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. I'm going to read that again. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus, who being in the form of God, oh my God, I'm going to read that again. Who being in the form of God thought it not robbery to be equal with God, but made himself of no reputation. Now, how can we honestly say that a lot of people are making themselves today of no reputation? And took upon him the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. And so we're discussing what Paul was telling the Philippians church is, let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. And so we're at verse 1 where it says, if there be any consolation in Christ. And the word consolation means I'm looking it up as we speak. The word consolation means if there be any, if it helps makes things seem better, or if it's any consolation to no one else that got much of a raise this either. This is an example. They're saying if it make anybody feel any better. So basically what Paul is saying is, if there be anything that's going to make therefore any consolation, anything that's going to make you be better, feel better, sound better, if there be any comfort, any love, any fellowship of the Spirit, any fellowship of the Spirit, any fellowship of the Spirit. You know, oftentimes, especially nowadays, there's not any talk of any fellowship of the Spirit. We're talking about any fellowship of the flesh, but any fellowship of the Spirit, any gathering of the Spirit, any oneness coming together in the Spirit, any bowels of mercy, fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord and one mind. So Paul is saying, let this mind be in you, which is in Christ Jesus. Before we even get to that verse, he's telling you what are the things that are necessary so that you can have the mind of Christ. Let the mind be in you, which is also in Christ. Jesus had mercy. Jesus had joy. Jesus had brought comfort. And then the next verse said, let there be nothing done through strife or vain glory. So we don't need to think on strife. We don't need to think of any type of contention. We don't need to think of any type of discord, or we don't need to have any vain glory. Don't try to get the glory out of things, but allow God to get the glory. If there be any loneliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. So it's saying, I'm going to lift up my brother better than I even lift up myself. I know we don't talk like this, but this is what the word says. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus, looking not on every man of his own things, but every man also of the things of others. I'm not trying to look out on the things of myself, but I'm trying to look out on the things of my neighbor, of my brother, or my sister in Christ. And then now we come to let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. He said all that prior to let you know that these things that I'm describing are the things that were in the mind, or in the mind of Christ. And he wants us to realize and understand that we got to have the same like-mindedness of Christ. Because we are believers and we belong to God, we need to think how he thinks. We need to think and go in the way and fulfill the things of God in the way that he did through our thoughts and through our minds. And we can't do this by having vainglory. We can't do this by walking in strife. We can't do this by thinking that we're better than the next person. Listen, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ Jesus. Let this mind be in you. And then the next verse says, who being in the form of God. I tell you, that thing is powerful. See, he's in the form of God, and even still being in the form of God, he still said, I don't care that I'm in the form of God. And I don't mean that in a negative way, but he's saying, I don't care. Yes, I'm in the form of God, but I'm still going to have the mind of mercy. I'm going to have the mind of joy. I'm going to have the mind of being on one accord with my Father. I'm going to be the one that has the mind of not getting any vainglory. I'm going to be the one that has the mind of not walking in strife. I'm going to be the one that has the mind of thinking myself not better than the next person, but I'm going to esteem the next person higher than I esteem myself. I know we don't talk like this, but this is what the word says. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. And I didn't give you a topic, but the topic is have the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ. And then the last verse says, but he made himself of no reputation, but took upon himself the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of men. He didn't go around saying, listen, I am the King of Kings. I am the Lord of Lords. I am this and I am that. He made himself of no reputation. Listen, everybody else was saying who he was. He just verified it when necessary and said, well, that's who you say I am. But his mind was, listen, I didn't come for a reputation, but I come to fulfill the purpose and the plan, and that is the redeemed man back unto God. I didn't come for a reputation, but I come to win souls. I didn't come for a reputation, but this is the mind we gotta have. I didn't come for a reputation, but I come to fulfill the things of the kingdom. I didn't come for a reputation, but I come to fulfill the things that God has told me to fulfill. Listen, make yourself of no reputation. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. Have the mind of Christ. That's what Paul was telling the Philippian church. And we have to think how Paul is telling the Philippian church. We got to have the mind of Christ. Because if you don't have the mind of Christ and think how he thinks, then you're going to think on how maybe the enemy thinks. Ain't no maybe. You're going to think on how the enemy thinks, or you're going to think on how your flesh wants you to think. You got to think on comfort. You got to think on the fellowship of the Spirit. You got to think on joy. You got to think of being on one accord. You got to think of you got to think of not having vainglory. You got to think, I'm going to esteem my brother or sister higher than myself. You got to think on not thinking about having a reputation, or try to have a large following, or try to have this or that, or trying to make yourself of a reputation. Christ could have made himself of a reputation, but he didn't. Christ could have made himself and saying, I am the one that goes around healing the sick. I am the one going around laying hands on the lame. I am the one going around giving sight to the blind. I am the one casting out spirits. But he didn't. He made himself of no reputation. Listen, you got to have the mind of Christ if you're going to be able to make it in this walk. You got to have the mind of Christ. He also told us to deny ourselves, to follow him daily, to carry our cross. So if you're denying yourself, you're not thinking about yourself. If you're denying yourself, you're thinking on the things which are above, and the things which are not, and you're not thinking on the things which are beneath. So you got to have the mind of Christ. Let this mind be in you, which is also in Christ Jesus. And so Paul is basically telling the Philippian church, listen, this is not the time to think of any type of selfish glory or vainglory or strife. But there's a bigger thing that needs to go on today. I need you to get your mind together and think on the things of Christ. I need you to get your mind together and think of yourself of no or try to give yourself any reputation. But you need to look unto the hills from which cometh your help, knowing all your help come from God. You don't need to think on so much of what's going on in this world, but Paul is telling them what they need to think on. And so as Paul is telling them what they need to think on, I come to tell you as a servant of God that you got to think on what Paul had even told the Philippian church. It doesn't just stop with them, but we also have to think on what he's telling us we need to think on. We need to have the mind of Christ. If you don't have the mind of Christ, then what's the point of being saved? If you don't have the mind of Christ, then what's the point of being a believer? If you don't have the mind of Christ, then what's the point of being a saint? Think like Jesus thought. Think on how Jesus came through and he said, Lord, prepare me a body, and I'll go redeem myself unto man. And I want you to hear me and understand, I'm not saying that you have to redeem man, because of course Christ is the one that did. But what I'm saying is his mission was to fulfill what he has set out to do. Let your mind be on that. He came in the form of a servant. He came in the form of flesh. He came in the form of taking on this flesh when he was sitting at the right hand of God. But he said, I'll go prepare myself. Oh Lord, prepare me a body so I can go down and redeem man. I didn't come to try to make myself higher than the next person. I don't got to prove anything. I didn't come to try to make myself greater than the next person. I don't got to prove anything. But I come that you might have life and that more abundantly. I come that you might have life and a greater glory is coming. Your eyes have not seen, neither have ears heard, neither has it entered into the heart of man what God has in store for his people. He said, I didn't come to try to make myself no reputation, but I come to redeem man back unto God. I feel a redeemer cry. I said he come to redeem. I said he comes to redeem. And so we have to make ourselves of no reputation. We got to have the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ. Have the mind of Christ. Don't have the mind of this world. He didn't say have the mind of this world. And I feel like today that we have more people who have the mind of this world rather than the mind of Christ. He said, let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ, who being in the form of God, thought it not robbery to be equal with God. Let this mind be in you, which was also in Christ. And that is a mind of humility. That is a mind of saying, I'm not going to try to make myself of no type of reputation. Now, if that happens, let it happen on its own, but I'm not going to go out and try to make myself of no reputation. I come for an assignment, and that is to win souls. I come for an assignment. Whatever your assignment is, plug it in there. And that's what I come to do and to be. I don't come to try to cause any strife or try to get any vainglory. So the same mind that Christ has, we need to have that mind because we belong to him and he's our example. So have the mind of Christ. Don't have the mind of anything else but the mind of Christ. Be blessed.